Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Man, that sounds echoey. I know my microphone got moved around a little bit, so maybe that's nothing. Maybe one of the OBS settings has once again magically changed. It does seem to like to do that more often than it should. Anyways, today is Monday, April 1st, also known as April Fool's Day, so this is going to be a weird day for video game news, certainly, in that there is opportunities for April Fool's Day announcements, although in at least the last year it seemed like video game companies in particular had given up on the whole let's just post a lie on April Fool's Day or around April Fool's Day and call it an April Fool's. Inherently, the internet being more permanent than a single day, it's just a terrible day for the internet, and it has been in the past. They have gotten, I think, a lot better, though, more recently, around just companies in general, not just video game companies, not messing with April Fools. Here we can see we have gotten a super rare pack ticket, so let's just go straight to the card pack screen and open that. Let's see, before we open that pack, let's just get a general idea of how many of these cards do we already have. There's a decent number of super rares we don't have in this pack, but we have plenty of the normals and rares. So the special ticket is literally only going to give you one pack. Which, yeah, that's not impressive. And I'm a little surprised that we haven't seen more of this from Yu-Gi-Oh! Where they would give you specific single packs in the hope that you would then be encouraged to open more packs. Let's see, Tryout Duel is starting on the 3rd. New season it has started, and new accessories. Although I think I may have already picked up these. Guess we'll go back and check. See if we... Nope, we haven't bought these. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel still doing a very poor job of spreading out its releases and content, and instead having you stagger or have to just save up until there is a new expansion, and then after you've saved up for that new expansion and spent all those gold gems, that's the point where you would never buy anything in between this point right now and whenever they start releasing new content, probably in a month. Which that definitely echoes the idea of coming in at the beginning of a month, potentially, and playing some Yu-Gi-Oh! And getting up to Platinum or Diamond or Master, wherever you can reach with your current cards, and then just stop playing. There's no incentive in this card game, and then particularly there's a lot of card games like that. Once you play ranked and get to a certain point, those daily quests are probably not worth it. Some games make it even worse, because if you end in a month, you might get way more rewards than doing the daily quest could ever give you in the first place. I certainly saw that with some of the big name Hearthstone streamers many years ago, is that you would have Hearthstone streamers playing day one on launches and getting everything unlocked or getting to the highest rank each month, and then having secondary accounts or just goof around accounts or free play events the rest of the month. For the accountability section, which I kind of resolved to not stop calling it that and start calling it the warm-up section, my schedule is going to be weird for the next couple of weeks at least. So, but so far so good. It doesn't feel like this extra appointments I'm having to do every single day are taking up that much time. The biggest concern, frankly, is the commuting and just making sure I don't crash the car, crash my car into another car. In particular, that's the main concern. But yeah. And I have to say, with the Steam Deck, it is very, very much helpful when you're sitting around and waiting. And so, yeah. Time certainly flies by. As for the Steam Deck, since I've been obsessing about that and working on that, I've accomplished a decent amount of stuff by not accomplishing a decent amount of stuff. It's a funny system I've gone with here, which is to point out feature requests on Steam forums and just say, hey, look, Valve, you're going to have to fix this. I can't fix this past a certain point. Things like, for instance, that there is no printing installed by default, which people already were complaining about that. But yeah, the keyboard and mouse input layouts. One thing I am noticing on my Steam Deck right now is that it does feel like I can overwhelm it fairly well and get it to lock up in what would be longer processes than I would expect. I would frankly assume that there would be either a pop-up saying, hey, this process is hung, do you want to close it? Or a spinny loading ball to show that it's still working and hasn't just locked up. And I think in a lot of ways that may just be KDE Plasma's fault for not popping up a spinny loading ball when the process is locked up. And some of that may very well still be Steam's fault, in that maybe the keyboard and mouse are locking up, but everything else is still running technically, even if it is fully throttled. One of the things I am noticing is that if I run Kodi, K-O-D-I, which is a music and video manager, it's pretty big. Perhaps it could do for some optimization, certainly. But if I run it, it seems like it is taking up either enough RAM or it's automatically stopping Steam for some other reason. Which, yeah, Steam seems to just totally crash when Kodi is launched. Which means the keyboard and mouse crashes down to its basic lizard mode, is what they call it. Which just means it's a lizard brain, minimal interface. I did actually accomplish something in that I figured out how to rotate the screen in a nice way for KDE. So, the problem with rotating the screen, and this is by command line. It's very easy to rotate the screen just by going to the system settings, obviously. The problem with the rotating the screen though is that it doesn't do anything with the mouse. So when you press up on the right touchpad as a mouse, the mouse goes up. When you rotate the screen, pressing up on the right touchpad of the mouse makes it go to the left, because it didn't rotate anything by 90 degrees, even though the screen was rotated by 90 degrees. And I'm almost 100% sure that is built directly into Steam. Inherently, the Steam controller needs to probably, well, first of all, they need to run the software as a server to make the keyboard and mouse always work whether Steam is open or not. It's ridiculous that Steam has to be open. It is a resource hog. In desktop mode, inherently, you've already exited it out of the default boot Steam mode, saying, I'm in a desktop mood, I'm not going to launch a game. And if I do launch a game, well then I'll just have to open Steam myself. So it's ridiculous that the Steam client, the desktop client, is opening and forced open on the desktop mode. But inherently, the Steam client is designed to run games. The keyboard and mouse should be its own service and should be daemonized so that that smaller program would load very quickly and always be running and restart itself if there is a crash. The next step, though, is that they have, when it is in gamepad mode, it report itself as an Xbox 360 controller, which is fine, but there's more buttons on the Steam Deck than there are buttons on the Xbox 360 controller. So they need to probably go ahead and make a second driver for a special controller that would receive the other signals and the other button presses, particularly the 3 dots and the Steam button in desktop mode should be doing something, or should be receivable. Even if they are being received as, and inherently I think Valve would probably just like to report directly to Linux that it is a Steam Deck with a lot more inputs, but sticking with an Xbox 360 controller allows a lot of games and a lot of compatibility to stay around, because PC games are most compatible with Xbox 360 controllers in detecting those. What might be helpful is to have a second layout that reports it as a PlayStation controller. The extra buttons as a PlayStation controller, but that would probably just confuse things. But yeah, they've also done absolutely nothing really with the gyro that's built in. To go back to being able to write a script to rotate the screen, one problem of rotating the screen, even though I have it rotating so that your hand is not grabbing the edge of the Steam Deck with where the heat vent is, it's instead holding it with the left hand. One would assume you'd be holding a tablet with the left hand and then tapping with your right hand. Yeah, and I'm grabbing my phone right now and looking at how I control it. Yeah, in my cell phone, I'm right-handed, so I hold my phone with my left hand and then tap with the more precision right hand. More people are right-handed than left, or ambidextrous. That certainly makes the most sense. You could change the code easily to go the other way, but there is definitely a danger of just your hands burning from the heat that is being poured out of the system if you grabbed it on the other side. Plus the power plug would potentially be in the way. But yeah, rotating it the other way by 90 degrees, it works pretty fine as a tablet. Yes, you do have a big stubby end on the bottom of it where the touchpads and buttons are and control sticks are. And yes, there is definitely a thought that a Steam Deck Lite with no controllers would be viable as a product to potentially purchase or make. But yeah, in its current form factor, it's fine. For the one to two apps that you'd actually use, that you would want to be in portrait mode to read it, and that's really where it falls down, is that there really is no point at this point where it's reasonable to think you would rotate the screen and have every single application run in a portrait mode, or that you would even really benefit from having every single application run in a portrait mode. Web browsers, maybe. I mean, if you were doing a ton of reading, but even then, web browsers and web pages tend to want to be more widescreen than portrait. Android has just done a great job, and I assume iOS has also, in that all of the applications for cell phones were remade or made from scratch to be in portrait mode, whereas every single PC and desktop thing has always been around the idea of widescreen mode. And widescreen mode by default, I think, is a wiser move, since you have two eyeballs on your head that are horizontal, not vertical. There's nothing I can do here. I'm gonna lose. But yeah, for ebook reading, for comic book reading, that's really where the portrait mode works, and that's two applications really, or like maybe Calibre for ebooks. I don't know if you really want to use Calibre for comic books or not. And then I picked one of 4 or 5 that are all fairly similar through the Flatpak Flat Hub on Steam, called Kodo, K-O-O-D-O. And so I modified the shortcut so that it would run a command line code to rotate the screen, then run Kodo. And then once you close Kodo, it will run the command to unrotate the screen. While it is rotated, the keyboard is going to be squashed and pretty unusable, and the mouse is going to be pretty unusable because it's not rotated. But just using it like, here's your tablet, so you don't have to carry a whole tablet around. Now, I have to admit that my tablet is a 10-inch screen. The Steam Deck OLED screen is 7.2, 7.3 inches. I don't know how long, but it is definitely noticeable, particularly in the diagonal, that it is a smaller screen. And in the past, I've never really considered a 7-inch tablet to be big enough. That being said, reading is all I use my tablet for. It's like a 5 to 10-year-old tablet. It's just not really justifiable to spend even $150 if you could get one that cheap for a single-use device. Same is probably true for Kindles if Kindle has a color screen. Now, the e-paper element of a Kindle might make it somewhat worth it, but you have to be a very big book reader for it to make sense. And generally, you're still, if you're getting the e-paper screen, you have to be a book reader that's reading in the light, not reading by nightlight or the backlight in the Kindle, because then you're really losing a lot of the value of the Kindles. Actually, Kindles don't have backlights. E-paper screens can't have backlights. They don't have a technology for that. It's side lit, actually. But yeah. Did I actually accomplish anything else, I wonder, with the Steam Deck over the past couple days? I know I've been watching a lot of Cracking the Cryptic, Sudoku, and doing a lot of that. I've been very much actively avoiding working on writing the code. Yeah. I used to enjoy programming, but at this rate, it seems like I hit even the slightest little hiccup and I just am not motivated by it anymore. But yeah, as far as making a window manager to adjust the size and shape of windows to work around the Steam Deck, I have not gotten back to working on that, and I am still trying to figure out the beginnings of the information to write a different program to take icons and uninstall the application but leave an install icon in KDE Linux. And you know, I'm just having trouble finding a good reference point of where the uninstall application itself is and how it uninstalls things. So, you know, it has something to do with either it being built directly into the start menu in Steam, the desktop mode of Steam Deck, which is called Kickoff, KDE Kickoff, or it has something to do with the application manager for Flatpak, which would be the that would be called Discover, like Plasma Discover. But yeah, I'm trying to look into the internal files of those and figure out where the remove or modify program right-click menu is coming from. There's a lot of weirdness in the fact of how KDE Plasma's desktop is run and built. It's basically a case where almost everything as far as the interface is not written with like code as much as it is written with almost like a JavaScript HTML file. It's called QML. But yeah, maybe a little bit more Python-y even. But yeah, it definitely feels like it's not a precompiled heavy elements in KDE Plasma. It feels like everything is modifiable, everything is overwritable, everything is a text file that is being interpreted by KDE's desktop environment, which almost certainly is what's going on. And I would almost certainly assume that there's just at the core of KDE is some either Wayland or in between KDE's desktop environment, Plasma, and Wayland. There is actual HTML type compositing going on where it's interpreting the text and turning it into a web page like application. Although they don't inherently look like web pages. Another thing that's weird about the Steam Deck OS is that a lot of the help files do not seem to get installed. So if you are somebody, I don't know how many people really do this, but if you are somebody who would install an application and then go, I have no idea how to do this one thing, let me open file help, a lot of times that will just fail miserably. That either the help files are not accessible because it's sandboxed, or the help files aren't installed in the first place. Which, yeah, that is the opposite of being helpful. I did accomplish one miracle thing, certainly, in avoiding doing any programming. A big part of it is, at least twice in the past 2 days, I've been just about to fall asleep and I don't want to get into a whole programming mood as I'm trying to fall asleep at consistent times and wake up at consistent times. More and more. But yeah, I opened up Gmail on my Steam Deck, and there has to be an award they deserve. They pulled off a miracle with the Steam Deck for me on this, in that I have had my Gmail email, which would have been the email, like my own personal email. I've had it probably since, it seems to be somewhere around 2007. The only email I would have had before 2007 would have been probably a Juno free email, which, if that email still existed, I would have no idea what it was. I would have never really used it for anything. I know we did use Juno dial-up internet for quite a while, but yeah, it was not really a time before 2007 where I would have been signing up for a lot of services, and even if I had, it would have just been signing up for a bunch of spam. Even now, when I went to my email, the vast majority these days of what I get are spam and advertisements, and there's definitely just not a lot of human-to-human conversations going on there. But yeah, because I was using a touchpad instead of a mouse, because I was using triggers instead of a mouse to move around, I was able to go through almost all of my email and mark it all read, which meant going through over 6,000 emails and marking it all read, and just delete a ton of promotional stuff and advertisements that just don't matter, things from years and years ago. There definitely have been periods in the past where I've kind of unsubscribed from things, and there is definitely a pattern that seems to happen with a lot of emails companies, where they will send out just 3 emails to try and get you interested, and if you don't react to those 3 emails, they just kind of stop sending you any, or they'll send out 3 emails on a very specific subdomain of their email server, so it will get labeled differently than what Gmail would default label everything as. But yeah, I was able to go to inbox 0, and I have never been an inbox 0 type person where there are 0 read messages and clean out quite a bit. Inherently, what motivated me to do that was the fact that your Google Drive is shared with your Gmail space, and so there was like 6 gigabytes of emails, which is a massive amount of emails and text. Uh, certainly. Although, I think it's also worth kind of pointing out that Google kind of cheats there, because Google will very happily email you stuff too. So they will fill up your storage space if you let them. But yeah, since starting my emails, really have never deleted an email. It's just, I keep everything for records. Now, inherently, now that I have deleted some emails, I am definitely changing history here if I was just keeping historical records of all my emails. But it still doesn't really matter. I still have like 23,000 emails that I kept. I just deleted a bunch of stuff that were pretty obviously advertisements. And I've started halfway through the process of sorting all my old emails into different folders by year, making it theoretically easier to sort things around and go back and check things if need be. But yeah, that really is just more of a testament of how much I didn't want to get into programming, that I was more willing to sit for an hour or two and just go through all my emails and sort them all. There's some interesting things there as far as just like Caffeine as a website. Looked like it might be an actual competitor to YouTube when it first launched. I don't think Caffeine really has gone anywhere, and I haven't posted any videos there. There's another one like that more automatically uploads some of the videos that get uploaded to YouTube, and is more peer-to-peer, and I get emails from that. BitChute, I believe, is the website I'm thinking of. But yeah, most of it is just garbage. I definitely am getting the feeling that I just need to get back to playing Hand of Fate if I'm not going to continue to work on the Steam Deck, but I really should finish the modifications on the Steam Deck to get further and make it more usable. I'm also going through different games to figure out what works and what doesn't, and on what way does one thing work versus another. Do I have anything else to say about the Steam Deck? No, I do have something to say about OBS. It does seem to very consistently nowadays always disconnect and reconnect in the middle of the stream in the first couple of minutes, first 20-30 minutes. Oops. Oh, I screwed that up. one of the things that I've done while I'm watching YouTube and cracking the cryptic is I've also found yet another Sudoku person, and so now I potentially could double the amount of time I'm wasting playing Sudoku. I guess I could do a quick update on my cell phone. There was a series of games, excuse me as I pour water into one glass with ice in it. What does this one do? Yeah, there was a series of just kind of puzzle games that were free on Android, so I got those and played the first one, which is always free, and it's not good. It's some pretty poor game design, in the sense that there's some confusing elements, there's inconsistency problems. There was a point where it definitely looked like I should be able to pick up a rock, but only one specific rock was the right rock to pick up, and the other rocks were not interactable. There's a point where there's a bunch of torches or lanterns, and it looks like you should be able to pick one of them up, but only one specific place with a different kind of torch is actually pick upable. And overall, I just think it's like so many other puzzle games on Android, which are just very lazily low quality experiences. Maybe not lazily made, but just low quality experiences regardless. So I also wasted about an hour playing that, maybe slightly over an hour. I'm still playing the Star Trek Lower Decks game. Not really a great reason for that. I'm still playing, what is the name of that game? Yeah, I'm still playing it as it's an adult game called Tinkafuma. Yeah. Yep. Maybe it says something that it's forgettable enough that you can forget the entire name of the game. But yeah, I'm still playing it. It's occasionally adding new anime waifus to collect in Tinkafuma and doing events. So there's frankly more new content being added per month than Star Trek Lower Decks gets, and Star Trek Lower Decks gameplay mechanic is very much designed to just be incredibly boring and incredibly grindy, and if I didn't have an ad blocker on it, the game would be unimaginably awful as far as its breed. But even with an ad blocker on it, it's not really that generous otherwise. It is still grindy and still unimaginative. I definitely wish there was a better Star Trek Lower Decks game if I was going to play something for real. And then I'm still playing Memento Mori. Memento Mori has added yet another new character. They do that every month since it's a gacha game. They've added some new rewards by in part merging some of the worlds that they had created in the past, and so I wonder if this is part of what the original plan was, or if this isn't a case where they realized that their concept of making a new world every month for new players was spreading the player base incredibly thin and leaving the original worlds, which are effectively servers, abandoned. But yeah, Memento Mori in particular is still an AFK game, and yet as an AFK game, an automated game that plays itself, there's still way too much of a daily grind in it, and it's only getting worse in that, which is fine if that was the only game I was playing on a daily basis, or if I even if I just abandoned one of my 2 accounts, which if I could merge those 2 accounts into one, I'd be fairly happy. I'd also say, as far as all the suggestions of Memento Mori, to not spend the 300 gems to get the new characters, to pull for the new characters, you're going to probably spend a lot more than 300 gems. I think that is probably wrong if you actually just want to have one copy of each character. If you actually want to be good at the game, there's strategies that they suggest are perfectly valid, but if you just want to own every single character once, then you probably do have to pull for each character, which is what you probably want to do if you're interested in any of the music or the story in the game, which is some of the best parts of the Memento Mori. Morte. I think it's Mori. It's M-O-R-I, not Morte. The phrase is Memento Mori. Remember, you shall die. Memento Mori probably doesn't translate to anything from Latin. Alright, was there anything else about the Steam Deck I wanted to say? No. Yeah, I guess I could say that there are some problems with my Steam Deck in particular that I'm still having. Like, I loaded up Bastion and tried to play it, and the sticky X button is still really sticky. Sure, I haven't played a ton of video games with it, but it is really unacceptable to have a button sticking as much as it is sticking, and I'm afraid that it's just going to stick for way too long, and then eventually I'm going to just end up taking the Steam Deck apart trying to fix it. Or I'm afraid that there might actually be something physically wrong with my Steam Deck's X button. But yeah, my attempts at loosening it up with a milkshake straw have proven to be less than fully successful, and that definitely kills the enjoyment of playing any kind of video game with a controller, is if the button is sticking. And that is certainly something I would say. As far as the physical adaptations for a Steam Deck 3 is get higher quality buttons. Get probably higher quality analog sticks too. If I was to guess, that would be a smart move. The touchpads, for the most part, work, but the fact that the left touchpad is set up as a mouse scroll wheel, I still need to spend some time tweaking that, because that does not work for me very well at all. You kind of have to put your thumb in the middle and then flick up or down the mouse scroll, whereas I would prefer to be able to put my thumb anywhere, and that touch would then be your new origin point, and then going up from that new origin point should scroll downward, I would assume, and going down should scroll downward, and you should be able to flip that if that feels wrong to you. It highlights something that I heavily suspect, that mouse wheels probably should be integrated into controllers. Before I had a Steam Deck and used it, I would have thought that Valve was being fairly just braggadocious about their touchpads and seeing that as potentially the new way that things are going to go and controllers should be. But I kind of been leaning towards buying into their argument. I do think that there is a future where at least analog sticks could be replaced with touchpads, and there would be things gained from that and not instead of things being lost from that. But yeah, I could see having slightly bigger buttons because the buttons are kind of small on a Steam Deck. Getting rid of the analog sticks and instead just having a D-pad and an ABXY buttons in the same place. Then you solve problems about replacing things and having stick drift and all of that, those concerns. And then you would just use the touchpads as the analog sticks. Yeah, that would definitely have to be an experiment. Somebody would have to do that to see if you could totally live with the touchpads completely and not use the analog sticks. And could you convince people to not use the analog sticks, particularly when you're running and gunning? Because I suspect in those scenarios, that's where it would be more difficult. If you were playing Call of Duty or something and trying to use a touchpad. But other things I would say physically for the next version of the Steam Deck, either there should be a layout for VESA mounts in the screw pattern in the back, the 4 screws in the center of the back, so you can mount it like a monitor, or there should be a camera mount on the top. Arguably both would make a lot of sense, is that you could mount a camera to the top of it. Although inherently, if somebody just made a USB-C camera, desktop camera, that was small enough that it just plugged into the USB-C port, you don't really need a mount there, and the Steam Deck really isn't going to ever be the greatest place that you would want to mount a different camera. So I could see a VESA mount on the back instead of having a camera mount screw, which would take away from the aesthetic, I think, more than a VESA mount would. There definitely at the top and bottom edges of the center need to be some spots where you could hook some things into it for accessories. There really is no great way to attach an accessory to it. Again, maybe if the VESA mount existed, you solve that problem. But yeah, I wouldn't be very happy about taking apart my Steam Deck and using the default screws, which are way too small, and screw holes to try and attach something else that would hold the whole Steam Deck together, or try and mount it. There's definitely room for the plastic to have holes to run a lanyard through it. That's very easy to do. That way, by default, you can add a lanyard so you don't drop the Steam Deck, which I think there's a big concern. Even if it's not a huge real concern, there is a big concern there that you would drop the Steam Deck and just break it. So a lanyard hole somewhere around the left side and the right side, just have one for each, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. The only other thing I would suggest is that they probably should move some of the internals around so that there isn't both a very hot spot at the top and a slightly warm spot at the bottom. They are, at the very least, doing a good job of keeping heat away from where your hands normally would be when you're playing a video game. But, yeah. I could see room for more just heat spreading. And then that center back part, again, it really has room to be more curved upward and have some more things there, whether it's just going to be a hub or that would give you more USB ports or HDMI out on top of what you already have. Something that could be more integrated into the board, which probably makes an argument for an accessory port, just some kind of USB-C on the back side at the bottom of the Steam Deck to plug an accessory directly in and not take up the plug at the very top right of the Steam Deck, which the fact that it has only one USB plug is interesting, I would say. But yeah, an accessory port with a flat back, then you could put whatever attachment you would want to put there, or a curved back and you could put room for another secondary NVMe, full-length NVMe drive, or a hub that would give you USB plugs and Ethernet connections and all that. There are software things, like it'd be kind of nice if the Steam Deck could be casted to. Of course, that would probably mean you'd have to run Android to make it a receiver from a Chromecast, or work with Apple to make it a receiver via AirPlay. You can cast from the Steam Deck to a Chromecast or an Apple TV using AirPlay, I'm pretty sure. I'd like to see the Bluetooth work and do more things, and that's maybe more of a Linux thing, but certainly with Valve coming into this is where I'd like to see Valve start to improve the situation for Linux users. KDE in particular is a operating system that doesn't feel like it has that much adoption and that much usage, so that there's a lot of room for it to rapidly improve and grow. I would like the Steam Deck to have some kind of wireless video streaming option. Usually those dongles, if they're going to be of any quality, are very expensive, but without it you have only one situation, which is to really buy a USB-C to HDMI adapter of some sort, whether that's a cord or a hub, and then you're going to plug in some long HDMI cord into a TV, or in my case on the computer, a capture card. Now, to do that wouldn't be that expensive. It'd probably be like less than $50 for me to buy a USB-C to HDMI and a cheap HDMI capture card and put it in my computer. And unfortunately, it feels like that is probably the best way to capture any footage of playing games on the Steam Deck for my YouTube channel. The only other option is to just pre-record the videos on the Steam Deck, which, if I'm out and about, there's a decent chance I'm not going to want to be just talking publicly, and so it would probably be closer to a case of where I was recording footage like a lot of other YouTubers do, like most other YouTubers do, and then playing it back potentially to commentate on it later. So I'd just play the game in silence mode and then watch the footage and comment on it and maybe even edit it out, which that would probably make my footage look way better. I'd probably play a lot better if I did that, but it would double the amount of time you're spending making one episode, and I don't really want to do that. But yeah, with OBS in the flat pack version not having the virtual monitor option, that's really the only thing I could do. The other thing I should do though is just install the needed program software and then reinstall it if it gets overwritten later when there's an operating system update, which I question how often there really are operating system updates happening on Steam, the desktop mode of SteamOS. If it's happening frequently enough, that'd be a problem, but if it's happening only once a year, when at most, that's not really that big of a deal. You could just make an installer script to reinstall it. And I'm definitely not going to be playing a lot of games on my Steam Deck to make footage. Mostly I'd just be playing games that are completely incompatible with my current setup. Which, yeah. I'm approaching a point here where NVIDIA graphics cards are going to stop being recommendable for building new computers if you have PlayStations and Xboxes and Steam Decks all using AMD graphics, and Nintendo Switch all using AMD ATI graphics. Alright, well, today was going to be a shorter day anyways because of April 1st, and since my schedule is already messed up with doing other stuff, non-YouTube stuff, for the next couple of weeks, this is probably I need to be more consistent on the streaming time. So let's go ahead and start talking about the video game news. And this will be my last game. Here. Let's see. So Koei Tecmo is retweeting people who are, I think, voice actors in Rise of Ronin, which puts me in this weird position because you have several people that I wouldn't really recognize as far as voice actors, but probably are somewhat important people if you do follow voice actors. Yeah, you definitely don't see a lot of that where voice actors are getting retweeted and being promoting themselves and getting support to promote themselves, particularly from Koei Tecmo's Twitter, which you would think would be less willing to do that. I don't know if there's really any real news for me there, though, because I don't follow voice actors. Troy Baker is about the only video game voice actor you probably would notice, as far as he's in way too many games. The next story we have from GameDeveloper.com. Ubisoft has laid off 45 employees to address market evolution. This would be almost applaudably, I really can't applaud laying people off, their first layoff since of 2024. And it's from their global publishing teams, which, okay. 24, not really that, I mean, 45 employees is not really as big of a number as we've heard from much smaller companies. Let's see, GameDeveloper.com says, making sure my child doesn't spend too much time playing video games. There's one app that is noticeably missing. While there are some kind of timekeeping apps where you can self-report, there is not a application in the Flatpak store to actually monitor how much time any one app is open or in the foreground. And so yeah, there's, for a game console, if there's going to be any kind of family elements there, it's going to be in the game version. Once they go to desktop, if they're playing games, a Linux game, any kind of tracking there goes away. Pretty much the same is the case for everything, which would make a great argument to lock desktop mode, which I believe you can do. The other problem with SteamOS though is that I did try to make a second user and it does not work. You cannot boot into second user. There might be a different way to do it, but in the end they've got such a tight control on the interesting, that's been updated. I thought you couldn't get a new Duel Live unless you accepted the first one. But yeah, there's a real reason why certainly they would want you to log into a different Steam account for a second user, and that's all fine and dandy for having a second Steam account and having different save games. But when the My Documents folders, when the applications that are just Linux games, when those all have to be shared, that's just not that helpful. But yeah, I can't get the login screen to open up the way they've got it set up. It always logs into the default user under the name of deck, and there's no way to easily change the user. So yeah, there's still a lot of room for improvement there as far as kids, and although it's also very questionable. I've recently learned from talking to some parents as far as just where their head's at, and there was a survey in Japan about this too, as far as when should kids get their first cell phones, and nearly 30% of all parents in one survey said that kids should get cell phones before they're in the late elementary school grades. So 3rd or 4th grade or earlier, they're giving cell phones to kids. And that's in Japan, where arguably you probably need cell phones a little bit more, but not that much, and not if you're a real young kid. So what was going on in my head as far as, could you get a Steam Deck for a kid and have them use Signal or Skype to make phone calls while they're connected to Wi-Fi, and then not pay a monthly fee for a cell phone and not buy a cell phone, and then also have, for the price of a Steam Deck, a computer that is pretty decent and a game console all in one. And yes, you could do all of that, but I think most parents would rather just get their kids a cell phone 1 year and then get surprised the next year when the big Christmas gift that everybody wants is a Steam Deck or a new Nintendo Switch. Which, yeah, I still think the Steam Deck could be way better of an option, but I don't think schools are ever going to let Steam Decks in their classrooms, so that's going to be a major problem. Some kids might get special exceptions, but on average, I don't think every kid would be allowed to pull out something like a Steam Deck in the same way that they'd be allowed to pull out a Chromebook. Now, this is weird as far as this GameDeveloper.com, because it's from Patrick Klepek, who, last I heard, does not work for GameDeveloper.com, but maybe things have changed, or maybe he's just done a blogger. Last I heard, Patrick Klepek was working at like Vice. But yeah, he's got like one article here and that's it. So maybe he does work for GameDeveloper.com, which might be the straw that breaks the camel's back as far as who I want to follow. Patrick Klepek was on Giant Bomb, particularly spent a lot of time in the Giant Bomb East side of New York and tried to be very much like a newsbreaker, more of a news reporter than like Jeff Grubb, who is more just about a rumor news reporter. But I'm not sure his opinions are ever particularly appreciated by video gamers, and I don't know if he really just did a particularly appealing job ever. Now, I'm not actually reading all of this, which this blogger literally just looks like is rewriting things. Patrick Klepek is a longtime video game reporter who's been covering video games since he was 14 years old. These days, he's the father of 2 daughters, including a 7-year-old, who she claims wants to be a gamer when she grows up, and brings his decades of reporting experience to the question his intentions around being a modern parent. Kids are playing video games at ages younger than ever, and games are more complicated than ever, but we're left with without easy answers as to what they should be playing, how long they should be playing, or who they're playing with. Having grown up as video games became popular, Patrick, now Dad, tries to answer these questions. So this feels almost like he's trying to start a new blog, or something. I didn't even know he had any kids, but yeah, he was out earlier, much earlier from Giant Bomb than once the final thing fell out. I imagine this is just a stock image. That is kind of interesting that there isn't really any LED controls other than the charging LED in the Steam Deck OLED version, and even in the cheaper versions of the Steam Deck you can't really control the color on that one LED. But in fairness, only Sony has LED light bar stuff, and it is underused to say the least. I think there is definitely an argument to be made that with increased automation and increased unemployment, video games may be the one thing that actually keeps societies going together, because a bored society and an unemployed society usually leads to a revolting society otherwise. So if you keep the masses well fed and happy, which is the way they've always run governments or tried to run governments, that they are less likely to revolt. But yeah, there is definitely some general thoughts here that are real, as far as not wanting your kids to be so single-minded that they're just doing one thing and one thing only. Arguably, though, the fact that people make articles about making sure kids don't spend too much time playing video games are never echoed on the other side, where there's not an argument, there's not an article that comes out consistently every couple months that says making sure my kid does not spend too much time playing football or basketball or baseball, whatever sport a sport parent might push their kids into, or sport that a kid might push themselves into. Everything in moderation, obviously. Video games are particularly low impact and low energy usage, so playing 4 hours of video games is in no way equal to playing 4 hours of baseball. And so there's a level to consider in that also. And arguably, of the forms of solo entertainment that kids can enjoy, I would say video games is much more mentally stimulating than watching YouTube videos or movies or music or TV. There's just not a lot of interaction going there in those forms of entertainment, for most kids at least. Some people are probably imagining things while they're listening to music. Reading books always sounds and feels like a better thing because you're having to mentally imagine and interpret the words yourself, which is a skill to develop, certainly. But I could also see becoming obsessive and reading too much books. If you were doing 10 hours of book reading a day, most parents would be ecstatic by that, but that could be a problem. But yeah, I imagine the next generation will think that the current generations of parents are ridiculous and overly obsessed about how much time they play video games. Let's move on with the news, otherwise this is going to take forever. I already talked off. Here's Video Games Chronicle. Ubisoft is laying off a further 45 staff as part of plans to streamline operations. Further 45 staff. They're including people who were laid off in Canada in November. Okay, fair enough. November isn't that far away. Let's see. I think I clicked on this article. We had already pretty much talked about how Embracer is freezing its acquisition drive as it restructures. Its restructure program has come to an end. And obviously we should already know that Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel downloads have topped 60 million. This is from Gamatsu, which notably Gamatsu is the only one of my 3 sources that bothered to even report on this. Although, in fairness, GameDeveloper.com never reports on the number of downloads or sales, and Video Games Chronicle rarely does. I have no idea who this character is, but they probably are new and powerful. And even Gamatsu was kind of late to the party to put out this announcement, which maybe means that even Konami was slow to put out a press release. Unity says it's shared AI training data with devs in a bid for transparency. Unity wants to prove its commitment to transparency by sharing AI training data with developers concerned about copyright violations. Yeah. Of course, how do you verify that the training data they're showing you is actually the training data that they actually are using? And still, even if you do have all the training data, how do you verify whether something is copyrighted or not when almost everything is copyrighted originally? It would have to be a case that Unity would have had to say that all of the training data was produced by them internally and being released as public domain, not just that it can show you what the training data looks like. Apparently, YouTube update could ruin many channels, according to TubeBuddy, which apparently they say they know something 3 days ago. Going by staff member on Twitter. They're still calling it Twitter. You'd think TubeBuddy would be calling it X by now. And they had a meeting with somebody. Although inherently, having a meeting with somebody at YouTube is a great way to get the wrong information. But yeah. That seems to do with text to speech. Now what I can take from this without actually watching that video is that YouTube is encouraging everyone to label anything that is AI generated effectively that seems like it could be real and could cause any confusion. I'm not explaining it as well as or as accurately as they did. But yeah. Basically, they don't want you making a video of somebody or taking a video of somebody and using fake voice generation software to have somebody saying something that they didn't say, or even rephrasing something that they did say, and they don't want you to use AI to take a politician effectively and try to manipulate voters. Is where their head is almost certainly at, as the general election in the United States is about to happen, or is quickly coming. But yeah, if you use AI generated art to make an anime girl, and then you use text to speech to give a voice to an anime girl, they don't care anything about that, as long as it follows all the other policies. That they just don't want Barack Obama, a fake AI generated Barack Obama saying something that Barack Obama would never say, and things like that. And so text to speech needing to be labeled, I think, is almost certainly them misinterpreting or being told the wrong thing. That being said, you wouldn't be making good content if you were just taking like books, public domain books, let's say, and converting it to text to speech and making a video around that, just making audiobooks in the form of YouTube videos, which I imagine somebody has already done something like that. And I could see how aspiring voice actors could read public domain books and act them out and make bedtime story type videos and make that part of their portfolio. That would make a lot of sense. But yeah, I think you're safe using text to speech as long as you're not trying to do something fishy with it. Nice. And they didn't even go into the detail as far as would they ever punish anybody for not labeling something. They said in the future, as this gets rolled out, there may be some some punishments if you don't label something and you use AI generated art. Inherently, your lack of monetization or copyright is probably going to get taken away way before then if you use AI anyway, so there's just no reason to use AI as a content creator at all, unless you just don't make anything at all and you think you can just scam a few bucks out of YouTube AdSense. It definitely makes a lot of sense if you actually want to ever be successful on YouTube to never use AI. And maybe in 5 years that stance will be reevaluated and there will be a different situation. But right now, I can't recommend anybody using AI at all, which highlights the ridiculousness that video game companies are desperately quickly using AI. That you would think their legal department would say, hey, put a stop on this, let's do some research, let's not potentially make a million if not billion-dollar game that turns out to be uncopyrightable because we used AI to make a small section of it. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Discord is going to reportedly be rolling out sponsored ads this week. Discord to me feels like it is yet another failed website. Unfortunately, it seems like this is just a problem with the internet in general, is that there's just a lot of websites that can't get as big as something like Reddit or Amazon.com, and so just have these successful websites that have taken the lion's share of the internet's attention, and they are not going to let it go to any competitors. But yeah, Discord as a concept probably needed some way to monetize, and it failed obviously to sell itself as a software product where you'd have to pay. It didn't even try that, so it was another one of these websites and services where they just wanted to get a large user base and then probably sell to another company who would then add ads to it. Seems like now they're just adding ads to it. Since I don't use Discord though, them adding sponsored ads feels like that is not going to affect me, and I don't know how many gamers are really going to be affected by it either. The interim CEO, Jim Whitehurst, explains Unity's product lead path to profitability, according to GameDeveloper.com. This is interesting that they have his picture here and then they put a background around it to make it more widescreen. I haven't seen them do that before. Really, at this point, though, I couldn't expect too much from even a new interim CEO at Unity, because I suspect Unity is not going to change significantly under an interim CEO. If he becomes the new CEO, maybe he's going to then whoever the new CEO is might make some bigger changes. Inherently, though, I think Unity has already lost a significant amount of its fan base for at least the next 4 years, and so there will probably be a whole generation of games developed on either Unreal Engine or the Godot engine or some other engine that would have been made on Unity, and the 4 years of less profitability for Unity is going to be almost certainly debilitating for Unity, just because they announced some really boneheaded license changes. Video Games Chronicle says Nobuo Uematsu will compose the main theme for Final Fantasy VII's remake trilogy's final game. It'd be my honor, he tells the creative director Tetsuya Nomura. Which, okay, this apparently was in a special talk session. I don't know if I have it. I think I do, but Well, there's another story about the second game in this Final Fantasy VII Remake from Censored Gaming I want to mention later. Sony's president, Hiroki Totoki, has officially begun his role as interim CEO of PlayStation. Totoki will be more hands-on with the Sony's gaming arm as a successor for Jim Ryan is found. I definitely feel like if this guy does not become the permanent president of Sony PlayStation, he is at the very least going to change things up fairly significantly, just because he's Japanese. And yeah, and the way Japanese people do business, generally speaking, tends to be very different than the way I imagine Jim Ryan did business. But I also heavily suspect that this is more evidence that Sony Interactive Entertainment, the PlayStation division of Sony, which Sony sells TVs and a whole bunch of other stuff, is coming home, as it were, to the parent company, and it is going to become, if not a Japanese company in Japan, it's going to become a Japanese company in the United States, in the way that Nintendo of America is basically a subsidiary of Nintendo of Japan and is really just a Japanese company in Redmond, Washington. I think we could see a lot more games being made by second-party developers in Japan, and first-party developers getting less and less work, which we've already started to see a lot of evidence of that. I could see a lot more Final Fantasy game style games getting released and greenlit and promoted. I could see the way games are advertised from PlayStation being very much closer to the way the Japanese PlayStation ads go, which are very different from the way games are advertised in the West. We might see the censorship issue that PlayStation has hoisted itself on change somewhat, and then we might see more visual novels and just anime waifu type games being allowed on PlayStation in parity with what's allowed on the Nintendo Switch and Microsoft's consoles. Of course, you could speculate wildly here. You could also speculate that maybe they are just going to close up shop. You could also speculate that they might just sell to Microsoft. Almost anything is possible, but kind of unlikely in those two scenarios. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says a Pokemon April Fool's prank promotes a fake Pokemon Sleep World Championship. The spoof video shows contestants sleeping in a huge arena. Which, yeah, we're going to run into some April Fool's Day stuff. I think YouTube creators is being April Foolish and talking about pottery crafting. But yeah, that's mentioning April Fool's Day. That's about it. No, YouTube creators not really doing too much. Libretto was one of the few ones I saw early where they announced the McServe for Libretto and RetroArch, which is supposed to be, I guess, a emulator for the ice cream makers at McDonald's. And then I don't know if this is supposed to be an April Fool's Day joke. I don't think it is, because it happened on March 30th. Apparently a Libretto member released a Dark Souls 3 mob that significantly enhances the visuals among some other things. So, okay. This is one of those harmless April Fool's Day jokes because you'd have to be fairly out of it to believe that they actually were going to make an emulator that could run this. Although, actually, if they had done that, that might actually have been helpful, although it would have gotten them into legal trouble and getting them sued by McDonald's are the company that makes these ice cream machines, which they work hand in hand. There was somebody who did release the actual guidance and a mod to these machines so that the ice cream machines wouldn't break as much, and the company that makes ice cream machines and McDonald's actively, I think, are still suing him and working against this person. And it's a perhaps interesting copyright case that will take years to get settled as far as can instruction manuals really be copyrighted, or are they too technical documents and thus not documents of a creative nature and thus not copyrightable. Inherently, there's a lot of companies out there that want to keep their repair manuals and their technical manuals hidden so that they can charge people for high overpriced repair jobs. Lego did an April Fool's Day joke where they're joking that they're selling a giant minion set. It's just huge. Now, what's weird about this is that a giant minion made out of Lego, clearly this is real, and almost certainly there are giant minions in Lego worlds. They're showing off the new brown bags, paper bags. And here it's just a giant amount of large Lego blocks. Now, the thing about these giant things in the way they are actually built, though, for Legolands, is that they have steel frame infrastructures on the inside of them, and they are gluing all the bricks down. So you really can't make a set that is that big. For a non-April Fool's Day joke, here this giant dragon isn't an actual set, but the Dungeons and Dragons set has been announced, in that it is ideally a playset. Frankly, this is an idea they should have been done years ago. So you have with Lego that you can build a mimic, you can build a beholder, you can build a dragon. There's a little tavern set. This expands into some of the medieval sets that have already existed, in that all of a sudden now some of the medieval sets that have been available and now are out of stock, those sets would have fit nicely, but you would pay through the nose to actually purchase and build those sets. And I question just how much of your table do you want to decorate when playing Dungeons and Dragons, because you could definitely fill the entirety of the table with Legos, but then there's not going to be a lot of room to throw dice around, and the imaginative, narrative, creative process of playing Dungeons and Dragons is kind of going to go out the window, and eventually you're just going to have people playing Legos while a dungeon master tries to keep people on track. I have no idea who any of these people are, but they may be very famous Dungeons and Dragons streamers. But yeah, for Hasbro it makes a lot of sense, since they wouldn't be able to sell plastic toys to represent the characters in Dungeons and Dragons any better than Lego could. Hopefully this is real news. Silent Hill 2's remake has been rated, suggesting its release date is soon by the Korean ratings board, which seems to always be the one where people get these scoops from, which for the most part they seem to be fairly accurate. We still are very much in the weird position though, where I know there's 3, maybe even 4 Silent Hill games in the works, and I am not sure if any of them will be received well, or if any of them will consistently make any sense in a narrative way, or if they aren't just all very separate games with Silent Hill as a label being slapped on it. Larry Herb saying, P.S. Monday is April 1st day, April Fool's Day. Take the day off the internet and enjoy your life. Saying Happy Easter also yesterday. There is basically nothing video game connected to Easter, which is fine. I mean, it's the holiest day of the year in Christianity, or at least it's supposed to be. I think a lot of people may default to think that that's Christmas, but no, Easter is supposed to be way more important than Christmas. And if video games were going to be in any way involved, it would either be probably an awful Christian video game, which we don't even see a lot of Christian video games, let alone well, we don't see awful ones, we don't see good ones, we just don't see them. Or it would be some kind of Easter Bunny game, and we might see some Easter Bunny games, but those tend to be pretty awful also. There's really just no theme around Easter that connects with video games. Dressing up in pastel colors. You could make a game that had pastel colors, and you could have outfits and skins for characters that had pastel colors, but that's pretty much it. But yeah, you're not gonna have crucifixions or resurrections or Easter bunnies running around in most games. Now, interestingly, there is one video game, I believe it's Assassin's Creed 2 or Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, might even be Assassin's Creed Revelations, so one of the first 4 or 5 Assassin's Creed games. You do have a point where a passion play is going on, so they are doing a recreation of Jesus being executed on the cross, and as the assassin you're protecting the actor, I believe, in the process, as the Templars are trying to assassinate him. So there is kind of an interesting integration there. It is one mission throughout the game, and it's not specifically locked or anything, so it happens always. But that's pretty much it. So I wanted to talk about censored gaming here. He has a new video out, how the English version of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth changed Tifa's bedroom scene. And yeah, they kind of significantly changed it here in the remake, in Rebirth. Which they definitely are changing things anyways. This is a scene, as I understand it, where it's a flashback and Cloud is talking about what he did to the rest of the team in the past, and he can say that he looked in Tifa's dresser drawer and looked at her clothes. In the first game, if you did that, you would see in the English version a mistranslated word that says orthopedic underwear. It was mistranslated. It was supposed to be underwear that's a little too old for her age, which you would probably have accurately translated that as quote-unquote adult underwear, or yeah. But in the Rebirth version, if you go to the dresser, he is given a second option to tell his story from this flashback. So it's not really a flashback as much as it is a visualization of what's being said. You're given a second option to say he did look or he didn't look, and that he was just joking about saying that he looked in her dresser. If you pick either one, and this is my main problem, just game design wise with it, if you pick to look, the characters in the present day who he's telling the story to will yell at him and be angry at him. If you choose to not look and say you were just killing, then the characters in the present day will yell at him and be angry at him. And the lines have slightly changed. In the Japanese version in particular, one of the characters says times have changed, as almost speaking directly to the player, saying times have changed now, you can't find underwear and go through people's drawers in video games and fiction, which is ridiculous because you should be able to do whatever you want in a video game. It is the safest way to express fantasies and desires we've ever made. But yeah, I could see them being mad at him if he did look, but then them saying, oh, haha, very funny. If you didn't look, it's ridiculous to be so anti what the game was originally that you're going to punish the player either way. Regardless, you never see, or you didn't even in the first game see what he actually saw. You just saw a text description of it. And arguably, since you're remaking everything else and making it all much more visual, remember this would have been a top-down 2D image in the original version of Final Fantasy VII. I really should just show the video. If you're remastering everything, if you're making everything look 3D and interesting visually, then why not show the actual underwear? Just some underwear of some sort. But yeah, here's the way the game looks originally. Received orthopedic underwear. Here, they don't even mention that. But yeah, it was clearly supposed to be, haha, I'm such a perv that I'd go through a girl's underwear drawer. But a joke. In the same way that a lot of the characters, Master Roshi in Dragon Ball Z, for instance, is a perv. And see, that would really suck. Think about that for a second. It's just how awful it would be if they went back and remade Dragon Ball Z and turned Master Roshi, whose main characteristic is to be a pervert on Bulma in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and just remove that element and yell at Master Roshi more than he was being yelled at for being a pervert. I can't. Can we no longer have, yes, we know this is unacceptable in real world type jokes, but it's still funny in the fiction? Apparently we can't really, because cancel culture really has gone against anything like Porky's as far as a movie, and I'm sure they're going to work their way up the years, and you'll have things like American Pie also get canceled, and until there's just nothing that's acceptable in fiction at all. So yeah, the censorship is happening. It's happening, I think, earlier in video games than anything else, and a lot of it is definitely self-censorship, but it's definitely happening. You can't deny that they've changed the text and they've changed the feel and the meaning and the outcome of the scene. Gimatsu here has a April Fool's Day compilation, although weirdly I think this is probably just from Japanese sites because it came out fairly early on like March 31st, so not really April Fool's Day. But here you have Dead Spicy Goddess of Victory, which would be a reference to the somewhat, I think, fairly successful these days Nikkei Goddess of Victory mobile game. Although, in fairness, Nikkei Goddess of Victory is not too different from this. It's just a mobile game. But, yeah. Let's see if any of this really catches my attention. As far as jokes. Every time an April Fool's Day comes around, it just feels like anybody who spends any energy on making these videos probably is not spending the money they are getting from their promotion budget well. Yeah, this Pokemon game stands out as being the one that might be really worth looking at. Here you have a video that's already privated. And inherently, because you're lying about something, somebody's gonna want to actually see a game like that, or want the game to actually be released even as a joke, and that's even more resources being lost and wasted. It's just not worth it to engage with any of that and make an April Fool's Day joke. Palworld might be the one exception where it might make sense to do an April Fool's Day joke. Apparently they're saying you can now date the pals, which definitely felt like you could date the pals, or they were implying you'd want to date the pals even before the April Fool's Day joke. Palworld would be like the one game I would say it might make sense to do an April Fool's Day joke just because they've got nothing else to show, and this might get people to remember Palworld exists. But even in that is just them wasting their resources when they should be working on making Palworld better. So Nikkei Goddess of Victory does not have scenes like this. It is very much a top-down 2D chibi characters wandering around an environment, and then when you get into a fight, you'll have a fighting section that's kind of like this, where they will duck behind a barrier and shoot, and so you can tap on the screen to destroy the same. When I played it, it was when it first came out, it was the same boring robots over and over again. Now, the thing about this April Fool's Day joke here is that this 3D model versus the live 2D models that the Nikkei Goddess of Victory makes is in no way as jiggly in the boobs and butt aspects, which is what its main sales point was, is that you would, every time they would bend down, you would see their butts or boobs, depending on the character and their stance, bounce and jiggle quite a bit. And there definitely, I don't think, is a section where you get in a box and crawl, or even upgrade weapons and a thing. Now, for an April Fool's Day joke, though, this, I can see somebody actually trying to do something like this. And at a certain level, Stellar Blade is pretty much just that. Anyways. Yeah, the thing that makes this the least interesting, as far as an April Fool's Day joke, is the fact that you're just shooting the robots. So yeah, you see that on any other day of the week, you might think, okay, this is some kind of weird Japanese development that somebody was actually trying to make. And I don't even get the dead spicy joke there, because it's not even like that felt anything like Dead Space. So yeah, it feels like even Gamatsu was pretty much done with the April Fool's Day jokes before April Fool's Day even started, and I think that's pretty much the case. Here is one example of what you can do, I guess, and I assume this is real, is you have like an NBA 2K game, and you can give Easter egg shapes and pastel colored outfits. But most games don't have outfits, and most people don't care enough to try and buy outfits or get them even for free. It'd be very weird, certainly, if Borderlands, for instance, gave out pastel colored outfits. But Borderlands is also very comedic, so it wouldn't be that crazy either to do that. On his way out, I guess, Jim Ryan claims that Sony has sold 160 million PlayStation 2 consoles. The PS2 remains the best-selling video game machine ever. This was inherently because the PlayStation 2 could play CDs and DVDs and was very much a good offering versus buying separate DVDs and CDs. And PlayStation 2 also was very easy to play ripped, cloned discs on in its later days, so it continued to have a fandom for a long time. PlayStation 2 was also out for a very long time, and it took them quite a while to make the PS3. And the PS3 was completely different, and so there was less reason to buy the PS3. Inherently, I guess this might be Jim Ryan claiming his heyday and success of the PS2 is all under his watch, and setting himself up to say nobody can beat my record. Although I really think the PS2 sales had a lot more to do with the Japanese fan base in particular. And then the other headline here from Video Games Chronicle is that Jim Ryan says the PS5 is well on track to be Sony's most successful console ever. I'd say right now we're at the top of our game. Again, just sandwiching and I guess patting himself on the back. I would like to see some real numbers though, as far as just how many units the PS5 has really sold. I wouldn't be surprised if PS5 sales are reaching 54.7 million, so another 107 somewhere around that 100, let's just say 100, rounded down easily. Over 100 million more PlayStation 5s would have to be sold to beat the PS2. If they never made a PlayStation 6, maybe that would happen. Or if they took a really, really long to make a PlayStation 6. Yeah. But on the schedule for the next few years, I could easily see there being the next Nintendo console selling like hotcakes next year in the first quarter, particularly is when it's going to start selling, and then that taking up all of 2025. I could see Microsoft making some major changes, either with another new console or a portable console the year after that. If Microsoft wants to compete against the Steam Deck, they've got to get some kind of device out pretty quick, and that would take up all of 2026. So you're talking 2027 before Sony would be able to put out anything unchallenged. Although Sony probably would just rush out to put out something themselves. In fact, Sony should probably be rushing even now to put out a modded version of their Portal device that is much closer to a Steam Deck, and much more usable, since nobody cares about the Portal device. But yeah, easily in the next 2 years at least, I see not a lot of passion to buy more PlayStation 5s. Not enough that would say another 100 million would be bought. And inherently, any device now could just constantly have a few models on sale. You could always have a warehouse full of PlayStation 5s for the next decade, and then that would keep your sales going up, although demand has to be there, certainly. That would cost you money in the long run. I guess I'm basically saying I don't believe them that this would be the most best-selling console or most sold console. Maybe they'll say it's the most successful console on some other metric, but yeah, whatever vectors he's picking, I think this is definitely CEO lie speak. It'll be the most successful across multiple vectors, which probably means that they're going to find some way to say it was the most successful in at least a couple of vectors, but probably not sales, and probably not profitability. Anyways, moving on. Apparently the Sonic 3 movie is wrapped filming. It's due to release this Christmas. I kind of feel like that Sonic 2 movie came and went without any fanfare, but maybe we will just see Sonic movies getting released every year, and maybe they will do well enough that it just doesn't matter. We may very well get to a point where there's just a new Sonic movie and a new Mario movie, taking up for the fact that there aren't that many new Disney movies coming out, and so there aren't that many kids movies coming out otherwise. Let's see. Final Fantasy VII's Rebirth's Platinum Trophy is currently impossible for digital players. However, there's a workaround for physical owners. Apparently there's a side quest bug. I'm sure that's driving a small percentage of trophy hunters crazy. And then Xbox has released a Blue Dragon background in honor of Akira Toriyama. Toriyama passed away earlier this month. It is interesting that Microsoft was able to do this quickly, and we did not see either PlayStation or Nintendo do the same, which almost certainly you would think that this image is something that they just got from Capcom or whoever, Akira Toriyama's estate, or the Blue Dragon Dragon Quest company. Wouldn't be surprised if this is an image that already existed and was already available for purchase, and then, but then they wouldn't have said it was released in that case. This is a weirdly helpful thing for Microsoft if you're showing more respect to a highly respected animator like Akira Toriyama than the Japanese companies are, because the Japanese companies are such Japanese companies that they don't want to acknowledge the existence of any creative person that isn't directly under the thumb of the corporation. Yeah, I could see that getting them a few brownie points. Very few brownie points, but a few. I doubt there's going to be more than 2 or 3 people who would buy an Xbox just because they're huge Dragon Quest fans and because they want to have this image and they want to pay respects in some weird way by getting this. I assume that this is free too. That would be really sleazy to sell it. Alright. Okay, let's now quickly go through all the games that I'm going to make YouTube shorts on. I suppose in the catching up section I should have mentioned that I did have my computer actually working while I was not working, and instead just watching a lot of YouTube and occasionally playing on my Steam Deck. But yeah, I uploaded a bunch of videos, still have a lot of YouTube shorts that I need to upload. I made a bunch of new YouTube shorts. I definitely need to schedule some more videos, even if I'm not really making footage myself. And yeah, if I'm not going to actually go anywhere or do any programming, I need to just get back to playing and the Fate 2, which kind of a perfect time to take a break and work on the Steam Deck. And really, I guess I can't get into playing Hand of Fate 2. That would take up too much of my time right now. But I had already burnt myself out. Here you have basically a 3D Angry Birds clone. Should I highlight VR-based Angry Birds clones? Yeah. I'll give it a chance. There is this weirdness, certainly with VR, where the Steam Deck is just not likely to ever be compatible with it. But weirdly, I feel like some of the controllers that Steam tried to design probably evolved into the controllers on the Steam Deck, as far as the gyro controls. But I don't see an idea there where you could plug in some VR glasses into the Steam Deck with the plug on top and then get some kind of augmented reality or VR virtual reality experience where you're holding a Steam Deck in your hands. It'd be interesting, certainly, but I just don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think the Steam Deck has enough GPU power to run augmented reality or virtual reality. Yeah. It'd be nice if you could do that, but basically we'd need an augmented reality glasses that with all the processing happening off the Steam Deck. And at that point you probably do need a USB-C plug at the bottom it really doesn't make a lot of sense that there isn't a USB plug at the bottom of the Steam Deck, even if you're just never going to use it. Like, having a second plug makes a lot of sense, and I don't really buy that the Steam Deck is in any way waterproof at all. It's probably somewhere around IP4 or something, where you could sprinkle water on the face of it and that's about it. Because all those vents on the top aren't going to be waterproof. And I guess in the case of the Steam Deck, unless I actively tried to drop a Steam Deck in a toilet, that there's far too high of a chance that it would bounce off the edge or the seat of the toilet than actually fall in, because it's such a long device. Which that's mostly what people are afraid of, is they're going to drop their phones in the toilet, or somebody else is going to drop their phones in the toilet. Getting rained on, yes. It shouldn't break immediately the second any moisture touches a device, but that's really the level of protection. And nobody's likely going to have a Steam Deck in their pocket when they jump in a pool. So it's 100 doors to get into a toilet. Interesting twist on a 100 doors game. This looks very weird. Too weird for me. I'll give this a chance. Yeah, so if it's not a waterproof thing, then why not just have a plug at the bottom? A USB plug. Like, unless they used the chipset that was just incredibly cheap, you would expect that there would be at least 4 ports in the chip for USB devices. And so, if the touchscreen was a USB device, which it probably isn't, that would be one. The buttons and controllers and touchpads and all of that probably should be just one device, but let's assume it's actually 2. And then the port on the top would be number 3. Maybe the gyro would be number 4 if it was a 4-port USB hub internally, being directly hardwired to different chips and components. And that's just highly speculative on my part. As far as I know, it's in no way that way at all. I'd have to run probably a program called LSUSB to see how many USB devices are available and how many ports are available. I'm not really going to do that in the middle of a stream, and that may very well be the wrong application. I'd almost say yes to this, but this just doesn't look interesting enough. But yeah, assuming that some of my assumptions previously were wrong, you would expect that there's either 6 or 8 ports to play with internally, which, having 2 USB-C plugs next to each other doesn't make the most amount of sense, but having one at the top and one at the bottom definitely does make sense. It's a little weird that the USB ports are not centered at the top, where you could then have the air vent blowing out air more on the side, but I guess it kind of makes sense too that you want the heat to exit as far away from the hands as possible. Yeah. I definitely don't suspect that the next Steam Deck is going to be much more powerful, because it is hitting a cooling factor threshold that it would have to find some magical way to address. Where it could do a much better job of cooling. And at a certain level, I think it could address it if you just made the entire Steam Deck about a centimeter thicker in the back. You could put a very large metal heatsink, passive heatsink on the back of it. I don't know how much that would really change the thermals though, since you're already using active heat sinks to blow hot air away. But yeah, I think there is definitely an argument to be made that some of these games I know are getting released finally. Some of the heating in the Steam Deck is more that the heat is all in the same place, so spreading it around would be helpful. That solid state coolers technology, haven't heard anybody say anything about that in a while. I doubt that would actually work to help anything. But that would be about the only new technology as far as cooling that I could think of that has recently come out. Zombies board game. I'll give it a chance. One of the Linux games that I installed and tested on the Steam Deck was basically like a tabletop simulator clone, and in that you could set up a chess set, but we have another Steamboat Willie open source game. This one feeling more like an actual game compared to the garbage that it came out basically the day it became public domain. I will say the power still feels like it's really good on the Steam Deck as far as battery life, which is good. I'm hoping to get at least a good year out of using it the way I want to use it, which is mostly going to be plugged in and then being able to take it out and about when I want to without any real concern of the battery dying. There are some devices where you could attach a battery backup to the Steam Deck, but yeah, I just don't plan on being away from an outlet that often. I would say their case needs improvement too. I just generally do not like the way they've designed the Steam case to have a room for a plug on the outside instead of room being on the inside where you could lock it, which I guess I need to get a lock. Come to think of it, I probably do have one somewhere. I guess that's another thing the Steam Deck could have, is it could have a Kensington key where you could mount it. That probably wouldn't be that necessary or that useful for most people, but if you wanted a Steam Deck in a GameStop, for instance, and you don't want people just walking off with the thing, that there's not really a great way to prevent people from grabbing and going with it. The Kensington hole would at least help a little bit there. Kensington being kind of a standard way that you can lock down laptops through a table. I think it's called Kensington hole. It's still a lot of the same old as far as garbage, but we also are seeing some things that are slightly interesting. I imagine it does just speed up the whole process and make it a better process if I am just rambling on about the Steam Deck instead of trying to comment on what is a lot of games here that just don't stand up to my attention. I'm gonna give this a chance. That Argyle Manor game that I closed might have been something. Suspense game. This is another one of a find the spooky random things. I'm not gonna promote those. They're just not enough game. We'll guess give that a chance. There's room for more micro SD slots, even if they were just holders. Certainly. Where you could just have a secondary micro SD. Although inherently, I don't know what's the point of having a secondary SSD or micro SD card if you can't really have a second user on the desktop mode. Yeah. And I'm not even sure how you would eject a micro SD without being in desktop mode. There probably is a way in Steam in the gaming mode to do it. This is interesting. You have Mahjong tiles, but they're playing Tetris with them effectively. I imagine that doesn't make for a better experience by any means, particularly looking at reviews. Here we have another one of these live action games that seem to be becoming more and more popular. No knowledge or no lady. Let's not make a YouTube short on that, though. That might get me in trouble with YouTube. Conservative when they want to be YouTube. Seems like this might be the same pop group or whoever. Also, although that may just me being racist, frankly, because they all look similar enough that I would have a real hard time telling them apart without knowing their name. There's definitely a weirdness that would run into the Steam Deck if you needed a dongle for any reason. If you need a mouse and keyboard dongle, if you need a dongle to receive a different kind of controller, for some reason if you wanted to wirelessly transmit the video, all of those are just going to stick out on the one single. Interesting. VTuber Blackjack, and here you have an interface that looks very much like OBS. Play blackjack with the stream with your audience, with you as the dealer. Interesting. Is this going to be a new trend where we start to see VTubers just straight up getting their fans to play blackjack with them? Meanwhile, or play cart games with them? I guess that's somewhat believable that that could happen. Although that's going to be a small selection of your fandom, 4 or 5 people at most. Other things I think other people have said about the Steam Deck that needs to be improved as far as just the finger triggers are too inset. In a weird way, I hit them when I don't want to hit them, and I miss them when... Do I even want to bother to put this on the follow list? Nah, I don't even care. I can't hit them when I want to hit them, and then I do hit them when I don't want to hit them, because they're kind of in the way when you're gripping. I think there's room for improvement as far as the back button concept. I'm not sure exactly what it would be though. Give this a chance and see what it's about. Though kind of at this point, I feel safe doing something like this. Blood, fuel, ammo, and speed. Perfectly fine to make a YouTube short on. And then I don't feel safe doing a visual novel that has an anime girl in it. Because YouTube's, I think, more concerned about that than they are blood. Although in fairness, I don't think YouTube is particularly anti the anime part about it. They are just anti anything that looks like it might be lewd or have nudity in it. Whether it's live action or animated, doesn't seem to matter to them much. I'll give this a chance. There's a lot of games here. Did I have 2 collections of games that I needed to go through? I don't think so. But it does definitely feel like, yeah, here's another one of these RPG Maker games. It definitely does feel like there's just a lot more games to look at today from the last stream. Which is probably true because we're just increasingly getting away from the first quarter drought of having no games come out on Steam. I think there is something to be said about looking at all of these games now from a different perspective as far as what games would jump out to be great on the Steam Deck, and even of the ones I've chosen to keep and make shorts on, I just don't feel like too many of them scream they need to be played on the Steam Deck, or that they'd be better played on the Steam Deck. Although maybe that's the beauty of the Steam Deck, is that it is not a replacement in any way. It is just an alternative option. And conversely, I'm not seeing any games here that look like I must play on my PC because my PC would do just way better graphics. Here we have very much an adult game being mislabeled and not put in the adult section. Yeah, and that's still happening quite a bit. One of my concerns about putting comments on the feature request discussion forum on Steam is that there's not actually anybody that works in Valve looking at any of the posts or comments at all. Or nobody that really cares or has any authority is looking at them. Maybe there's some kind of moderator for the forums in general. But you really don't have any other place to put it, and the forum is about the best place to put it. you could try and email Valve directly, but you're probably not going to get a response. And putting it on a forum makes it public and raises the accountability level a little bit. Come on, let's get through these games already. How many are left? Still seem to have a ton. Oh, I guess part of the problem here is I didn't curate when almost certainly I could have found some extra time to curate all of this and get rid of a first pass of really garbage games. Of course, that's all just taking more of my time out. Not that I'm actually ever doing a good job about being precious with my time. Multiplayer whack-a-mole game. It's an interesting thought. Whack-a-mole is kind of a weird game in that it's too simplistic of a game to really translate over to what modern games would be. Of course, there's a decent amount of games like that, old games in particular, that just don't make sense nowadays. Donkey Kong's kind of a great example of that. 4 screens of the same thing over and over again, or Pac-Man, just like 1 screen over and over again. Yeah, if ever you were going to make an argument that kids are spending too much time playing video games, it would have been in that first and second generation of arcade games when kids or adults were pouring quarters into playing very simplistic, repetitive experiences such as Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, and even more simplistic things than those. Come on. Now I know I'm just getting impatient, so I'm probably making some mistakes here. We have yet another adult game not labeled appropriately. It's been a while since we've seen a 3D CGI adult game, though, actually be mislabeled. Yeah, one would hope with the new Steam families game push that there would just be a element here to, I'm gonna say no to this because there's just too many hide and seek games like this. Yeah, you would kind of think with the Steam family's focus as a beta that there would be some push to appropriately label games and appropriately punish or correct when a developer totally bypasses the adult sections. Although in fairness, why wouldn't an adult game developer want to bypass the adult sections when the adult sections are too hidden for their own good? See. Alright, that's it finally. That's one thing that I would like to see the Steam Deck perhaps address better too, is that if I'm in an adult profile on my Steam Deck, I'd like to be able to see adult games on the storefront, whereas on my PC I'd like to have a separate option to not see adult sections when I'm streaming, and there's no way to do that. It is account wide, whatever account you log into, which is probably the better way to do it in the long run, but I would like to be able to whitelist my Steam Deck. Or in most people's cases, I imagine you'd whitelist your personal computer because you're not walking around in public with a personal computer, where you might be with a Steam Deck. So I could see flipping it around and doing it the other way. Let's see what we have for SteamDB today as far as the 24-hour peak of games, if anything has changed here. Doesn't look like it has. Seems like people are just continuing to play the game. You're seeing a little bit of a drop off here. I seriously doubt that there's a lot of people who don't play video games on Easter. I could see some highly religious people saying we don't play video games on Easter, but I could also see parents saying totally you can play video games on Easter. So pretty much doesn't look like anything has changed. I could repeat that sentence for the Steam storefront. Nothing has changed here, but I do suspect I do suspect a summer sale is coming. This Portal Revolution DLC I did relatively short time ago, and while visually it looks very interesting, the puzzles in it are pretty poor in my opinion, although everybody else loves it. It just didn't feel like there was a new idea to me in the design of Revolution, and there was absolutely nothing revolutionary in the story of the game. And South Park here is mixed reviewed. That's about as much as I want to look at. And yeah, things are on sale, but not big enough or important enough to go any further. Alright. This will be the next attempt, definitely not the first attempt, at making YouTube clips and headlines and chapter markers. If I've gotten the regular expressions find and replace code right, then it will work. That is a big if. I struggled quite a bit trying to figure out how to search and replace everything after a certain number of characters and just put a ... after a few words to shorten the chapter markers. And I'm also risking that the math has to be right to convert it into hours, minutes, and seconds for the chapter markers also. So there's a lot of room for failure as far as getting the chapters and the clips made, although I think the clips will work because I think I have that pretty solid at the moment. Of course, I still need to better integrate the creation of the clips so that it's not wasting my extra time to make clips after each stream. Alright, let's read the headlines and then we'll be done for today. Discord will reportedly roll out sponsored ads this week. Nobuo Uematsu will compose the main theme for Final Fantasy VII Remake Trilogy's final game. South Park Snow Day debuts at 3rd place in this week's UK physical charts. Tekken 8 players are expressing frustration at the addition of a new Tekken Fight Pass. I definitely can sympathize with that. Sony President Hiroki Totoki officially begins his role as interim CEO of PlayStation. Pokemon April Fool's prank promotes fake Pokemon Sleep World Championship. Capcom fans ask for new Dino Crisis and Mega Man games as the sequel survey continues. So, yeah. I guess Capcom fans want Mega Man and Dino Crisis. Interesting, but we'll see what they actually make. Silent Hill 2's remake has been rated, suggesting a release date is soon. Cyberpunk and the Witcher Studio CD Projekt doesn't see a place for microtransactions in single-player games. Vladimir Putin reportedly orders the exploration of Russian games console. Good on CD Projekt in that previous headline. They really, we need more companies coming down against microtransactions. This consideration is reportedly part of a plan to develop Russia's native games industry. I don't think that was going to work very well. I don't think any of it's going to work, and I can't help but assume that a lot of this is just nonsense being spouted. But yeah, if Russia developed a video games console, I'd imagine there's a whole bunch of internal spyware that would be on it to spy on their own citizens, and it still probably would fail miserably in the sense that Russians have never really had a marketplace to buy legitimate copies of games, so they were either going to the store and paying a little for pirated copies that were literally on the shelves of stores, or they were pirating copies themselves. So you would have to make something that was just incredibly easy to break people of the habit of piracy, which I imagine even today is exactly what the Russian people are still doing. Meanwhile, I question how big there is of an audience as far as video game consoles in Russia when you have so many other things going on in Russia that need to be dealt with first, and so many of the gamer-aged males being drafted to the military front. I would assume that this is probably just the Russian equivalent of pork politics, or some kind of scheme. Let's read the details here. Issued the following meeting earlier this week. Instructed the government to waive requirements for organizing production of both stationary and portable game consoles in Russia, which I'm not sure that really means building their own as much as it means making bootleg versions of Xboxes and Nintendo Switches and things like that, or even bootlegs of NESs and Super and Game Gears. Yeah, I would have suspect that if anything happens, you'll just see Russia become a lot like China, where there's just a whole bunch of Famiclones and garbage bootleg devices. As part of the order, he also looked into developing of an operating system and a cloud system for delivering games to users. Yeah. So maybe Putin got a Steam Deck, and now he's saying we should rip that off. Anyways, moving on with the headlines. Jim Ryan calls the PS5 being well on track to be Sony's most successful console ever. Jim Ryan claims that Sony has sold 160 million PlayStation 2 consoles. The Sonic 3 movie has wrapped filming. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's Platinum Trophy is currently impossible for digital players. Xbox releases Blue Dragon background in honor of Akira Toriyama. Eddie Gorgo joins the Tekken 8 roster next week. Reveal trailer confirms. Minecraft is reportedly getting a native PS5 version. Wish I could pronounce some of these words better. Yeah, and the good news here is it doesn't look like we have that many Gematsu articles today, so we will be done fairly quickly. We might be done even under in 3 hours. Landfall releases 4-player co-op horror game, content warning for PC. Guess I need to make a YouTube short on it, even though it is an online co-op game, and I'm not gonna bother to put it on the fall list because of that. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel downloads top 60 million. Tiny Build announces an open-world survival crafting game, Duckside, for PC. Is this a real game? No. Or is this just an April Fool's Day joke? I don't know. It looks like an April Fool's Day joke to me. Like a Dragon, new title cast auditions announced. It's not Yakuza Kiwami 3. Night Dive Studio announces PO'd Definitive Edition for all consoles and PC. I feel like this is a real game, but like a really old game, which is mostly what Night Dive Studios releases. I'm going to put this on the follow list just because I want to see if anybody bothers to review it. Those are great examples of old games that just really don't make that much sense in modern days. Inazuma 11 Victory Road Worldwide Beta Test Demo downloads top 500,000. Unicorn Overlord shipments and digital sales top 500,000. I think I mispronounced this as Overload a lot of times. But I actually pronounced it right and then stuttered on pronouncing it right because I shocked myself. April Fool's Day 2024 compilation is available at Gematsu. Inti Creates announces a fantasy robot anime inspired 2D action game called Divine Dynamo Flame Freak. Okay, it looks like a survivals game, if you were going to have a survivors game with more of an anime look to it. Generally speaking, though, I don't like animes where you have a magical girl and a adventuring swordsman guy and a robot. I don't like the crossing of sci-fi and fantasy to that extreme, and frankly even the isekai, you're the single hero adventure stories that are more modern today feel disconnected when you have more of a magical girl element, although you certainly can have a fantasy game where there's a sword guy and a magician staff lady, or vice versa, sword lady and magician staff guy. The Kindman Remedy is coming to the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Switch on April 11th. I already made a YouTube short on that. And yeah, it'll take me a while, I think probably months, to get around to actually reprogramming GameDeveloper.com's webpage because they made it intentionally difficult to click on the links. EU raised 7.5 million euros in funding for the 2024 Creative European program. I don't think we talked about that, but I think we probably have talked about everything else, so we'll leave it at that. PlayStation 2's console sales reportedly top 160 million units. And yeah, that's going to be the end of the show. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.